Hi, welcome back to educator.com. This lesson will discuss XML namespaces. XML is used to create new kinds of web documents, and there are a number of different ways you might go about this. One way might be to simply create your own new set of elements and make a new document type out of those, or you might take element sets from different existing document types and combine them. This gives you a lot of flexibility without having to come up with a whole lot on your own, but it does lead to the potential for conflict, especially if you have elements with similar names. The way that we avoid this when we're combining XML documents is through something called namespaces. In this lesson, we'll take a look at what namespaces are, and we'll take a look at a brief example of creating a new XML document out of two different existing XML document types using namespaces. Namespaces are a means of identifying collections of reserved words for particular XML document types so that they can be combined with other markup without fear of conflict between identically named elements. Let's start by looking at some of the concepts behind XML namespaces. Let's take a look at some web page code here. This is some XHTML. And it's a pretty basic web page. We've got our head element, our body element, and in the body we've got a table. The table has two rows. And the rows each contain two data cells. And we just put some text in each of the data cells so that we can see them on screen. If we look at them in a browser, the browser realizes that we are laying out tabular data, which is what the table element is for in HTML. And so it puts one row above the other and lays out all the data according to the way it would look if it were in a table. Now let's say that we have another type of XML document. Let's say we have something that represents a furniture collection. You can have a document type declaration up here with a DTD. Our root element is fern for furniture. And so here we have a fern document. And as we might have a table or love seat or chair, we have a table element here in our furniture collection, only instead of rows and data cells, we list the material the table is made of, the number of legs it has, and what size it is, and we could think of any number of other elements that might go into a furniture collection document for a table. So the question is, what would we do if we wanted to combine these different document types and we wanted to use both an HTML table and a furniture collection table, and we don't want to confuse whatever program we're working with? This is where namespaces come in. And to understand namespaces a little better, let's take a look at how they're formatted. Namespaces are declared in the same format as web addresses, but they are not locations. The web address is like what you see at the top of your browser window, and you may know that this is called a URL, or Uniform Resource Locator. Actually, according to the World Wide Web Consortium who came up with this, they haven't called it a URL in a long time. They now refer to it as a URI, or Uniform Resource Indicator. Now let's take a look at the typical URI here. Right? http://www.educator.com, that's the domain. And then computer science is a subfolder, XML is a subfolder of that, and Anderson is a subfolder of that. And this is where we would find the files related to this lecture. The syntax is borrowed from the Unix file system, where the double slash indicates the server, and subsequent slashes indicate subdirectories. And it's used by the World Wide Web Consortium not just for the location of files, but also for the organization of ideas. If we look at this URL again, we can see that Anderson could be considered part of the XML category of lectures, which is part of the computer science category of lectures, which is all part of what educator.com is doing. So it's a way of organizing ideas in addition to a way of locating a file in a directory system. So if we get away from the idea that this is a location for something and realize that it's a way of grouping ideas together, it's a little bit easier to understand what's going on with XML namespaces. Here, for example, is the namespace for XHTML, the XML reformulation of the HTML web page language. If you're using XHTML, you're supposed to refer to it using this namespace. And again, this is a way of organizing ideas. XHTML was something that was being worked on in 1999 by the World Wide Web Consortium. So you would not necessarily expect there to be a web page if you were to plug this into a browser. As it happens, just because they were trying to transition people from thinking of URIs as locators and thinking them as organizing ideas, there actually is a web page there. It's up to you as to whether you consider that confusing or not. And let's see how this is used in the field, as it were. Let's go back to our browser. And I'm going to take a look at the educator.com homepage, not only the page itself, but also its source code. And in my HTML element, and this is actually supposed to be required for all XHTML documents, although you don't always see it, here is that namespace. It is the value of an attribute called XMLNS. XML namespace. Simple as that. What this does is it tells the browser that everything that follows, any element name, any attribute value, is all meant to be interpreted as HTML as opposed to any other possible web document type. And when we use them in an XML document, we can create more than one namespace and use it to distinguish different portions of our document. Let's take a look at how that works. So now that we know how to identify namespaces, let's put them into action. Let's go back to our file types here. We have our furniture collection and we have our web page, both with a table element. And let's take a look at the webpage2.html file. And this contains some XMLNS attributes like we saw on the educator.com homepage. Here is one just like we saw in the source code of educator.com, and it shows the XHTML namespace declaration. But then we have another XMLNS attribute, and this one has this odd little thing here, the colon with an F. This is called a namespace prefix. What I'm going to do is anything that's part of the furniture collection elements, I'm going to prefix with an F for furniture. It could be anything. I could put any collection of letters there or any one letter I want to, but F for furniture makes sense to me, so that's what I'm using. And I'm making up a namespace here for that. noplace.com/callname/furniture. Again, it doesn't matter whether or not there's a page there, because the idea of a namespace is to organize ideas. So the way I put this to work is I have my head element, because my root element here is an HTML element. So I'm dealing with a web page, and I'm going to be combining furniture collection elements in there. So here's my head element from HTML. Here's the start of my body element from HTML. But now here I have a table element, but it's got F colon in front of it. It's been given a prefix, and this is actually known as a qualified name. So I have my table element here from my furniture collection, and it has elements from furniture collection: material, legs, size. And I've prefixed them all, both in the start tag and the end tag, with this F to tell my browser, hey, this isn't an HTML table, it's something else. It's something from a different XML document. And I've told you what that is up here in the namespace declaration. Following that, I have an ordinary table. And then my HTML page closes out here. So let's take a look at what this looks like in our browser window. Now, since my browser has no special plugin for furniture collection document types, since I just made them up, what it does is it's encountered an element that it doesn't know what to do with. And anytime your browser finds an element it doesn't know what to do with, it just takes its contents and spits them out onto the screen. So I've got wood for small here, which is exactly what was in my furniture collection element. And then I've got an ordinary HTML table that's interpreted properly and laid out according to what I think that a HTML table ought to look like. So by using special XML namespace declarations, we can create what are called qualified name prefixes, and then we use those prefixes throughout the document anytime we're using an element from that particular namespace. So in this lesson, we've seen that namespaces can be used to separate reserved word collections that are being used in combined XML document types. It provides a means for name conflict resolution so that if you have different documents with similarly named elements, you can avoid confusion on the part of the program that's trying to interpret them. And that allows you to combine a wide variety of elements from a wide variety of different kinds of XML document types.